Hey boys and girls, yesterday you listened to Mrs. Haig read you a story about Laura and her family, Little House on the Prairie. Today we're going to be reading another story about Laura called Going to Town. Before we get started with that though, let's talk just a little bit about the setting of that story. So I want you to think to yourself, was Laura living today or was she living a long time ago? You're right, she was living a long time ago. Boys and girls, we call that the past. So these stories are about what happened in the past. And the past is very different than how we live today. So it's kind of interesting. So as we read Going to Town, I want you to think, how do I go to town a little bit differently than Laura? And maybe think, I wonder what's the same about how Laura and I go to town also. All right, boys and girls. Going to town. Once upon a time, a little girl named Laura lived in the big woods of Wisconsin in a little house made of logs. She lived in the little house with her pa, her ma, her big sister Mary, her baby sister Carrie, and their good old bulldog, Jack. One day, Pa said that as soon as he had finished planting the crops, they would all go to town. Laura, Mary, and Carrie could go too. They were old enough now. Oh, boys and girls, let's stop and think. Laura's about 5 years old, I would say, probably about your age. She's never been to town. Have you been to town before? You've probably definitely been to Morrill, but I even guarantee most of you have probably been to Scottsbluff and Gearing or even Torrington, which are different towns. So we've traveled there lots and lots probably almost every single week you get to go to town, don't you? So boys and girls, Laura and her sisters have never been to town. That's pretty interesting. Laura and Mary were very excited. The next day they tried to play Going to Town. They could not do it very well because they were not sure what a town was like. They'd never even seen a store. Then one night, Pa said, "We'll go to town tomorrow." That night, Ma gave Laura and Mary a bath. Then she wound their wet hair tightly on lots of little rags. In the morning, their hair would be curly. When Laura and Mary woke up, they put on their best dresses. Mary buttoned up the back of Laura's red calico dress, and Ma buttoned up the back of Mary's blue calico dress. Then Ma took the rags out of their hair and combed it into long, round curls that hung down over their shoulders. After breakfast, Pa drove the wagon up to the gate of the little house. He had brushed the horses until they shone. Ma sat up on the wagon seat with Pa, holding baby Carrie in her arms. Laura and Mary sat behind Ma and Pa on a board across the wagon box. They were going to town. How are Laura and her family getting to town? What are they taking? Right, they're taking a wagon that's pulled by horses. How do you get to town? Probably a car or a van or a pickup, maybe a motorcycle, but I don't think any of you probably ride in a wagon pulled by horses. They were happy as they rode through the springtime woods. Ma was smiling, Carrie laughed and bounced, and Pa whistled while he drove the horses. Rabbits stood up in the road ahead, and the sun shone through all their tall ears. Twice Laura and Mary saw deer looking at them with their large, dark eyes among the trees. Suddenly, Pa stopped the horses and pointed ahead with his whip. "There you are, Laura and Mary," he said. "There's the town of Pepin." Laura had never imagined so many houses and so many people. There were more houses than she could count. Laura looked and looked and could not say a word. Pa helped everyone down from the wagon, and they walked up to the biggest building in town. This was the store where Pa came to trade. As they climbed up the steps of the store, Laura was so excited she was trembling all over. The store was full of things to look at. There were sacks of salt and sugar. There were pink and blue and red and brown and purple fabrics for dresses. There were boots and hammers and nails and big wooden pails full of candy. There were so many things that Laura did not know how Pa and Ma could ever choose. Does this look like the stores you go to? It's pretty different, isn't it? When all the trading was done, the storekeeper gave Mary and Laura each a piece of candy. They were so surprised that they just stood looking at their candies. Then they remembered and said thank you. The candies were shaped like hearts and had printing on them. Mary's candy said, "Roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you." Laura said only, "Sweets to the sweet." After they left the store, they walked over to the lake at the edge of town. They all sat on the warm sand, and Ma opened the picnic basket that she had brought. Inside there were bread and butter and cheese, hard-boiled eggs, and cookies for lunch. Now, I don't know about you, but when I go to town, I usually go to a restaurant to eat. They had to bring a picnic with them. After the picnic was over, they all got back into the wagon to go home. It was a long trip through the big woods to the little house. Laura and Mary were very tired, and baby Carrie was asleep in Ma's arms. But Pa sang softly, "Mid pleasures and palaces though we may roam, be it ever so humble, there's no place like home." Oh, boys and girls, I want you to think, how am I different than Laura? How is me going to town a little bit different than Laura? Maybe you have some similarities too. All right, boys and girls, check out the next video for a way to make a flow map all about the story Going to Town.